Hey Exiles, this has been a busy week in the world of Path of Exile 2. Lots of players, lots of feedback, lots of changes, all hitting Path of Exile 2. Many came this week and numerous more are coming next week. Plus we have some extremely curious new insights from Jonathan Rogers during a developer interview on the Dropped Frames podcast. I won't waste any time, let's hop right into all the big juicy news and updates concerning PoE 2. Just a very brief spoiler, if you've been enjoying PoE 2, all these things are basically improvements to the game, and if you haven't been enjoying PoE 2, some of these improvements might pull you back to try out 0.20 Dawn of the Hunt. And if they don't, maybe you'll come back for 0.30 or the 1.0 launch in 3 years. So let's look at this sequentially. After a highly controversial forum post on April 6 detailing issues PoE 2 players were having with the game, Grinding Gear Games followed up the day after with a slew of big changes coming to the campaign's third act, the Val Jungles. Succinctly, now Act 3 is much shorter. As for a longer explanation, it seems many factors contributed to the third act being by far the longest for most PoE 2 players. Many of the things were cut content that aren't present in the game that still existed in the actual maps, but had no content in them, so they'd become dead ends and players would roam down them, get lost, and end up doing nothing for an extended period of time. Perhaps once the bosses or the encounters that are supposed to be in these areas are completed, they will be brought back into Act 3. This would definitely turn it back into being the longest act in PoE 2 if all this cut content is added back. A bunch of area variations were also removed to make it easier to navigate some of these environments like the Chimeral Wetlands and the Matlan waterways. Plus a bunch of checkpoints were added to some of these longer areas and dangerous areas, meaning if you die, you're not going to be thrust back to the beginning of the level. I gotta say, I've now played through the reformed Act 3 3 times, twice in normal, once in cruel, and it is much shorter, especially some of those more sluggish areas like the Matlan waterways and the levers. You feel like you are zooming through that. Same with the Drowned City and the Apex of Filth. Man, I gotta say though, in the Apex of Filth, it feels like even though the area was shortened, the same number of monsters are still present. And the density is just insane. You can get swarmed in that area quite quickly. I think a lot of players saw this as a big win, and I do agree. The day after the area changes were announced for Act 3, the respectable and well-known content creator for PoE, PoE 2, and other games, Zizaran, interviewed both PoE 2 game directors, Jonathan Rogers and Mark Roberts. The interview was contentious, volatile, and extremely productive. Ziz did a great job, Mark did well, and despite initial frustrations, Jonathan also ended up understanding many player concerns with the current state of PoE 2. In that very interview, Mark promised he'd see many of these things changing internally today. Now, a lot of people noticed that both sides seemed kind of hostile at the beginning. Zizaran was representing the player base that was very heated, and in the moment, the community was outraged at many of the things that were happening with PoE 2, and Jonathan initially responded very negatively to that, but by the end of the interview, Jonathan even apologized to Zizaran for essentially getting up on the wrong side of the bed. And everybody made up in the end, and like I said, it ended up being a net positive for all PoE 2 players. And before we hop into exactly what played out later that same day, I would like to take a moment to address the impact not only this direct dev chat had on PoE 2's near future, but what I believe had the other most impact amongst all the feedback given to GGG about 0.20. The drop of PoE 2's recent Steam reviews to mostly negative. Do note, these are now mixed, but they did drop to mostly negative for quite some time. I think more so than any good or bad feedback thread on Reddit, the forums, YouTube, anywhere, this is the most public, pivotal place to voice distaste and concern about the future of a game you care about, like PoE 2. Yes, it would be silly to say the absolute firestorm that occurred in the days after launch across the entire PoE 2 community didn't heavily incentivize Jonathan, Mark, and the rest of GGG to take action swiftly, but I think across every vehicle for feedback, the Zizaran interview and the dropping of recent Steam reviews to mostly negative drove the most change forward, and swiftly at that. In the Dropped Frames podcast that Jonathan did today, he actually gave out a little tidbit saying that this recent reaction to 0.2 Dawn of the Hunt was the largest negative reception to a patch in the history of Path of Exile in the perspective of Grinding Gear Games. That means in their eyes, it beats out Expedition, it's 3.15, which was notoriously the biggest backlash to a patch ever. Chris Wilson went on a podcast tour, pod after pod after pod, talking to the community about the patch. And then the other one was Lake of Calandra, which was more so trench warfare in Reddit, with Chris Wilson getting into the thick of it on the forums and having his comments downvoted by the thousands. That is absolutely wild to hear Jonathan Rogers saying this update, Dawn of the Hunt, was the biggest pushback ever received by Grinding Gear Games. It was something that I had thought, but they have officially confirmed it. And to Jonathan's credit, you know what he said? They would have done the same exact thing that they ended up doing, right? Made all these changes, responded to all the feedback, tossed out the bad, took in the good, and made the best changes possible. The only difference with this is that they were super vocal about the changes they were making and posting patch notes and philosophies and mini manifestos every single day. And you know what I say to that? Thank goodness it is finally like early access. This is exactly what I and many others wanted the game to be like. Constant patches. I know during 0.10 there was the holiday break, and that definitely impacted the number of changes that they could make and updates to the game that they can make. I really hope that the rest of Dawn of the Hunt looks a lot like week 1. Maybe not as swift, but I hope they continue making changes to the existing game and saving those bigger updates like classes and acts and endgame for the new number patches, 030, 040, and so on and so forth. Okay, so back to what happened later that very day in New Zealand time, but April 9th my time. Grinding Gear Games unleashed another forum post detailing a host of tremendous new changes, many of them discussed in the Barry Zizaran interview. And then one day later on April 10th, Grinding Gear Games revealed yet another novel of updates coming imminently to PoE 2. And on April 10th, that patch came out, and this is what it contained. 020E fixed a bunch of the issues myself and many others had with PoE 2, namely monster speed changes, which I thought was the biggest issue in PoE 2. It has been drastically improved. They went through basically all the monsters and on a case-by-case basis changed them, and en masse made a change in which now monsters can no longer interrupt themselves when they're doing a moveset combo. Beforehand, they could interrupt when they were doing a chain of attacks and instantly start chasing you if you got out of range of them. Now, they can't do that, and they actually finish the combo, which allows to give you some time to react to those abilities. They also made some boss changes, which, honestly, hey, I'll say it, I kind of disagree with. The Viper Napawatsi one, I liked that was a very difficult boss fight, but these right here, the Uxmal and Zyclusion, the Chimera fight in the Trial of Chaos, and the normal fight in the Chimera Wetlands, this was a bad fight on the Huntress, on any melee-based character. I also fought it on my warrior. The number of times it leaps into the air after doing ground effects and not allowing you to get in range, it was horrible, so that has also been improved. There have been some further player minion changes. Unfortunately, it still seems like minions are in a pretty bad place. I will defer to the master Gazzy TV on this. Go check out his videos. He is still struggling with minions, unfortunately. Crip is also not having the greatest time here. Alongside all these changes, there were also a series of buffs to various archetypes throughout the game, such as Bleed, Chaos, Sorceress, Huntress, Warrior, Ranger, and a select few others, alongside a change to the Delirium mechanic, making it last longer because it was expiring very quickly. And then biggest of all, in the end game itself, you now see rare monsters on the minimap as soon as you load into the Waystone, which is just incredible. It cuts down the amount of time backtracking, searching for these monsters, being frustrated that the last rare is on the other side of the map, and it allows you to plan out the experience you are having in endgame. I've only done about 10 Waystones so far, but every single one has felt so much better than 010. There were also some minor improvements to various other parts of the game, such as adding lighting to rogue exiles so that you're not losing them on your screen while you're fighting them, or further improving the pushiness of various monsters, which lots of people are frustrated with, including myself. They also made a few other balance changes right here, such as this one, a fixing of a bug where blood boils from the ritualist ascendancy didn't propagate if the monster exploded on death, such as when using Herald of Blood. My friends were experiencing this and it made their ritualist build absolutely feel terrible. Then there were crafting changes. This is a big one for casters. We have now finished adding all the mods to runes for caster weapons. Desert, Glacial, Storm, Iron, Body, Mind, Rebirth, Inspiration, Stone, and Vision runes now all work on wands and staves with their own set of modifiers. And now there are 12 Artificer's orbs scattered throughout the campaign, and when you do Renly's quest in Act 1, you are given a blank rune and you can choose what that rune is to put into your weapons or armor, which is great. It's further encouraging that crafting system that they currently have going on with runes. I will harp on this for one moment though. I think this is an inferior crafting system compared to a game which I will name, Path of Exile 1, the crafting bench. I know, I'm sorry, I'm going to mention it. This is the crafting bench with so many extra steps. Yes, we're going to get affinities for runes coming up this week. We'll talk about that in just a moment, so they aren't clogging up our stash and our currency tab and all this, but still, having all these separate items, and now there are tiers of runes as of 020, lesser, greater, so on and so forth. It's just so messy when there is just a system in which you could just craft these modifiers onto your items and basically have it work the same way without all these extra steps with the sockets and with the dropping of the runes. It just makes this feel bad and it makes it difficult to manage. We'll talk about a few of my gripes in a little bit, like attributes and gems dropping, but this is another one of them. I just struggle with runes and needing specific ones to drop to attach to my gear and then constantly needing to break down socketed. I don't think that this is a system that they should have dropped from PoE 1. We have Ascendancy, right? We have this system. It was reformed for PoE 2 with the Trial of the Sekima and the Trial of Chaos and the Trial of the Ancestors, which will be coming up with Act 4. I think that they should have just iterated on the crafting bench and not tossed it out, turned it into something new for PoE 2, but kept the fundamentals in place. I don't think runes are it, and I don't know if I'll ever jump onto the rune bandwagon. They could be in addition to the crafting bench. Maybe you even get rid of runes and you just have soul cores and talismans now, right? But runes, they're not for me. So in that patch, there were the crafting changes, the area axe changes, the monster speed changes, and a bunch of bug fixes and the like. An overall net positive patch, good patch. But that is not the biggest patch coming to 020. There are a bunch of other changes coming this very week, the launch week for Last Epoch Season 2. The first thing being added in this upcoming patch is changes to charms. This is big. This is essentially allowing you to get more charm slots deterministically. Charm slots will be based on the level of the belt, and the implicit of the belt will grant you more charm slots. It no longer will be an affix that has to roll on the belt itself. Specifically, they have it right here. Belts have 1 charm slot until level 32, up to 2 until level 64, and up to 3 from level 65 and onwards. This is also very important. Unique belts can always have up to 3 charm slots. So remember, you will still need to roll these charm slots onto your belts, but now they will always be appearing on your belts. It won't be something that you have to find as an uber rare mod. And it won't interfere with other modifiers that you want on your belts, which is super nice. There's also this final line right here. We have also done a pass on charm mods to make them more powerful and rewarding. Let's hope that's true, because they suck. I'm gonna zoom in on this one right here because it is huge. Stash tab affinities. We are adding stash tab affinities for the following categories of items: socketables, fragments, which includes tablets and trial keys, breach, expedition, and ritual. That is fantastic. Remember, socketables, that includes soul cores, that includes runes. This essentially means you'll be able to designate certain stash tabs to hold these, and when you control click, no matter what tab you're currently on in your stash, they will automatically fly to that tab of the stash, like with waystone tabs or currency tabs. Big win, GGG. I think for runes should have been in the game from launch. Same with tablets. There's also this big line right here. We will also be allowing charms to go in the Flask Stash tab or any tab with the Flask Affinity W. And then for anyone who has reached the PoE 2 endgame, this might be the biggest change of all coming in the next PoE 2 patch. Atlas bookmarks. We have added the ability to bookmark locations on your atlas to find them easily later. Right-clicking on a node will allow you to create a bookmark by picking an icon and optionally adding a label you can type in. You can have up to 16 bookmarks. They will appear as icons around the outside of the screen with the direction allowing you to scroll to them easily, or you can click on them to instantly take you there. You can also view a list of bookmarks under the legend and click them to go there. This is a huge change. You'll be able to bookmark certain locations that have a bunch of towers in them, that have been juiced by towers, or if there's a citadel in one direction, anything like that. This is wonderful. I'm glad that it's in the game now. Thanks. You thought that was all? No. There are even more changes coming this week, and this is a big one. Grinding Gear Games has finally made up their minds on whether or not they want people to respec Ascendancy classes, and the decision is, drumroll, they are allowing you to respec them as of this next patch. Mark and the rest of the team got in a room and said, all right, are we letting them do it like in PoE 1 and in last Epoch, which releases Season 2 this week? Yes, they are. So as of this week, you will be able to change from a Blood Mage to a Lich or to an Infernalist with ease. The only catch is you'd have to complete the trial, of which would grant you the current set of points that you have. So if you have 8 Ascendancy points, you would have to beat that final tier Trial of Sekima or Trial of Chaos to respec your Ascendancy class and change it. It's pretty simple, and I'm glad it's in the game now. I did understand why they originally wanted to have it in the game. They wanted it to be a permanent choice, like a class choice, but I think they can't do that unless they do something that I have literally asked Grinding Gear Games to do forever, not only in PoE 1, but in PoE 2 as well. Adding Ascendancy classes to character select. They're not anywhere. You don't know the choices available to you until you actually ascend. Nowhere in the game is this stated, okay? You actually have to go complete Trial of Sekima or Trial of Chaos and discover what your Ascension classes are. Or if you're just a brand new player, discover that it actually exists. This is crazy. And if it was on character select saying, okay, I'm going to be a warrior and I can be a Titan, a Smith of Katava, or a Warbringer, I think the argument for not being able to change the Ascendancy class would be a lot stronger. But they decided to go this way. Well, that's cool. Additionally, they're making a few endgame changes. They are adding more rares to tower and hideout maps. They are doing some more new crafting changes. As each new rune tier is unlocked, we are removing the lower runes from the drop pool. This is to stop you getting spammed with lower runes. That makes total sense. And they are adding the ability to add sockets to scepters and adding some specific mods for scepters to talismans and the like. So minion lovers aren't left out on this. Then there are some extra totem changes, just a few minor buffs here because they're absolutely getting eviscerated in the end game. The Shard Scavenger Reservation is doing a little bit more for players, and then you are getting a My Skills on the Gem Cutting tab. When using an uncut skill gem, it was often annoying to find the skills that you were using from off classes to level up. In order to fix that, we have added a new tab to the Gem Cutting window that shows you all the gems you have equipped, which is a nice quality of life feature. I still think they should add the ability to just see all the skills in the game without needing an uncut skill gem. Maybe that'll come eventually though. So that's all that has changed in PoE 2 in the first week of Dawn of the Hunt and what's going to be changing this week. Additionally, there was a Dropped Frames podcast with Jonathan Rogers that came out today, and it had a few interesting tidbits that I thought I would just highlight for all of you here. The first is one I already brought up earlier, the fact that Dawn of the Hunt was kind of seen as their most disastrous release ever, more disastrous than Lake of Kalandra, Expedition, or anything else before that. That is pretty interesting to hear from Jonathan. And he actually cites the reason being them being disconnected from what actually needed to change for a few reasons. One, Christmas break. Christmas break was like 3 weeks. They went out of the office after 3 weeks of crazy changes happening and responses happening in the first 3 weeks of PoE 2 EA. Then they were out for 3 weeks and they kind of lost sight of what needed to be done. The other thing was super interesting. It was the fact that almost everybody was loving the game, And the love of the game was drowning out the stuff wrong with the game during the 0.10 release. And the fact that many people are complaining about things now that were still problems in 0.10, but the problems weren't brought to their attention because they never bubbled to the surface. They never outweighed the positive feedback or the feedback about endgame, which was obviously greatly addressed in 0.20. It was very interesting to hear Jonathan say that, because there are things like armor, for example, that obviously bubbled to the top, and they just said, we're not touching armor yet. No changes there. So I'm not sure how much I really buy this response. I think that they picked their battles. They said, okay, we can fix the end game. We can fix a bunch of outliers and redo the balance of the game, and we can add the Huntress, but that's it. That's the scope. It sounds like 0.30 is going to be a chunky patch, and it is going to focus on those things that are bubbling to the surface right now and make sure they are addressed and make sure players are having fun. I'd guess armor archetypes are at the top of that list. And if they aren't, what are you doing grinding your games? Jonathan Rogers also revealed that he may be doing a developer live stream prior to the release of 0.30, showcasing him playing the game with the new shinies that are coming in the next patch. Will it be the Druid? Probably not, but I'm just going to throw that in there, which would be really interesting. He seemed open to the idea and said, I don't know. There's no reason I shouldn't do this, so I'm probably going to do it. That'll be really interesting to see. I think it would be fun and illuminating for many, because Jonathan claims to have a very firm grasp on the game, and I do believe him. I think he plays this game a lot, and people who make fun of him for saying, I need to have fun playing the game. So I know the game is fun, and I am determined to make it fun for all the players as well. I think it's fascinating to hear him say that he needs to know the game is fun and he needs to have fun, because it's important for the top level people at these game development studios to understand and love their game. I see people dunking on him for wanting the game to cater to him, but I think it makes sense. He was also asked to comment on the Elon Musk account sharing situation and whether or not Elon will be banned. He simply declined to comment, which also makes sense. Grinding Gear Games nor Tencent want to draw the ire of Elon, Elon's fans, anti-Elon, just anybody. So just refusing to comment is probably the best move. Additionally, it's bringing a ton of publicity to PoE2. Elon streaming it and dying, and his lovers watching, and his haters watching. It's a bunch of free publicity for Grinding Gear Games and Path of Exile 2, let's be honest here. Even though it is very much against the rules from everything that I have read and digested. And that's all the news about Path of Exile 2. It was quite a bit. Now for myself, I currently have a Huntress in endgame. I'm on an Amazon. I'm doing Lightning Spear with Primal Strikes, although I'm leaning more and more toward Lightning Spear. I also have a Warrior that's entering Cruel, and I have been having a great time, truly enjoying it, although my character doesn't feel super powerful in endgame right now because I'm in SSF, and I have terrible gear, and I have been struggling with a few specific things. One, finding gems. I'm just struggling finding gems. It's very rough. I don't know. I experimented a lot. It's specifically support gems. I have tons of skill gems, tons of spirit gems, but support gems, I basically have none of. So I posted this on YouTube and Twitter. I'm wondering what a solution here is. Do we get a gem bender? Is there a breakdown recipe of turning one gem type into another gem type? I don't know. It feels bad in SSF when I can't experiment with anything else because I literally need support gems to drop. There's no other way to get them. Maybe there's a solution there. The other big struggle I've been having, and I think lots of other people are feeling this too, are with attributes. I hate attribute requirements and how high they are, not only for skills, but specifically for items, especially spears. I have had to swap around my attributes on my tree or try to find attribute items oh so much, and it is frustrating. Me wanting to equip this new spear that requires, oh, it's dexterity and int, not dex and strength anymore, or it's dex, strength, and int, and I don't have enough of all the. I just need to juggle this all the time, and the requirements just seem far too astronomical for the travel nodes that only grant 5. I spec'd into the dex cluster, which gave me a significant amount of dexterity, but I still need strength and intelligence for my spears, which require a decent amount of attributes. And it does not feel fun solving this puzzle. I think ARPGs, a lot of the time, they are puzzles that you need to solve in regards to gear and your character creation, and sometimes the combat encounters and the boss fights. And those are usually fun. Attribute juggling, not fun. Have not experienced this in any other ARPG or game. Well, actually a little bit in Elden Ring. For the hour and a half I've played, 2 hours I've played of Elden Ring straight, I actually did experience this, and I didn't like it there either. I don't like it in PoE 2. Is the solution to bring attribute minimums down? Is it to increase the places where you can get attributes? I don't know. Is anyone else experiencing this? And in the comments of those posts, I did see a lot of people were also signaling with me here. So I wonder if this is something that GGG is looking at. I know that it's a tricky situation because if you supply too many attributes, attribute stackers become too busted at endgame. But man, early game and early end game, it feels bad swapping all your attributes around when you get new pieces of gear. I guess there is one thing I can add in here after doing about 8 more maps after recording this, and this is the state of loot. Okay, I've played endgame now for about 10 waystones. I'm making them magic or 3 mod rare, and now I'm out of regals. I'm out of elks. I don't have any exalted orbs. Where's the currency? This didn't happen in 010, and I didn't start trading for items until very late in my progression. And I have been looking elsewhere, YouTube, Reddit, Discord, Twitter, and it does seem like people are experiencing a severe lack of loot. And granted, your games didn't really say they made any changes to loot, especially in the end game. So I'm wondering if this was another stealth or accidental nerf to the amount of currency dropping due to the way that rarity changed in 020. And if it was, I really hope there are changes ASAP because my stash is empty. I think I might need to swap from SSF. Other than those qualms and the monster speed stuff, which has now been addressed, been enjoying myself, gonna see how far I can push in SSF before I swap to trade. I'm sure I'll have to do it eventually so I can dome that Arbiter. We'll just have to see. Gonna keep pushing, and we all know what's happening this week on Thursday. Last Epoch, Tombs of the Erased is dropping. I did an interview with the developers. It went awesome. Make sure you check that out right now if you're at all interested in Last Epoch, and make sure you check out some of my upcoming streams in which I'm going to be playing PoE 2 and Last Epoch. Thanks so much for watching this video, Exile. Make sure you give it a like if you liked it and subscribe for more. I'll see you in the next one. Stay sane.